I think brands are in the early stages of understanding the just dramatic shift that consumers are making to mobile communications. And that's understandable because if you go back in the history of how brands were developed, in the 1950s and 60s, when we built warehouses and we started manufacturing major global brands and shipping cars off lots and cases off shelves, we used traditional media to build those brands, and it was very effective. There was a set number of channels and radio and print publications, and that was extremely effective in building mass global brands. The consumer behavior has shifted and shifted rapidly. And so now consumers are spending 25% of their time on their mobile device. They check it 150 times a day, sometimes even more. And so suddenly brands need to be where consumers are, which is spending more time on mobile. And spend has not caught up completely with that, although it's moving pretty dramatically. So just a few years ago, spend was less than 2% on mobile for brands. Today, it's over 10% globally, and so that's a pretty dramatic shift. Yet, if you were looking at exact numbers to numbers, you would say, shouldn't spend be equivalent to about 25%? It takes time for that to catch up. You don't just turn something on a dime and change everything you've been doing for the last several decades. Brand marketers need to think about shorter form video because typically the best length is 6 to 10 seconds. Now, are there the exceptions? Absolutely. During the holiday season, we saw beautiful creative from Burberry and John Lewis out of the UK. We see beautiful films from Nike, Procter & Gamble's Thank You Mom, that are much longer than 6 to 10 seconds. So certain creative breaks through, but the majority of consumption is in 6 to 10 seconds, which is a new way to think about how to tell your story. The other thing that brand marketers have to think about is sound off, because most people experience their environment, their advertising on their mobile phones with their sound off, because they're doing it perhaps in a meeting or perhaps in a crowded environment. And so how you think about communicating your message with sound off is also a new muscle that marketers are thinking about. Interestingly enough, one of the categories that has thought about sound off forever has been the alcohol and beverage category, because they assume when you walk into a bar or a local pub that you may not hear what's on the television, but you can see it. And they do a lot of their advertising in those environments. And so that's the one category that I have found that is very, clued in to sound off, but many other marketers are just learning. Measurement systems for the last 20 years, when digital started, have been cookie-based. And that worked when you had a single desktop that you were engaged with, but now the average consumer, particularly in developed markets, have multiple devices. They may check their phone in the morning, they may use their tablet on the train if they're commuting, they may show up at their office and have a desktop. At night, they may experience some content on their tablet and then go back to their phone. So as a marketer, you need to be able to send that message to the consumer on all of those different devices, and then most importantly, be able to measure what is actually happening. And so we have something at Facebook called Atlas, which is a technology that we acquired from Microsoft. We had to rebuild it from scratch, but it is based on people's identity so that you can target and measure across device. I think we're in the earliest stages of that transition from cookie-based measurement to actual unique identity. I think we're seeing a very big trend in the blurring of what we would traditionally call brand and DR. And I think that is basically because of the tools we have access to now in digital marketing, where you can do both very effectively and very almost simultaneously. So an example of that in Canada is A&W, where they had very specific brand objectives to make their consumers aware that they had very healthy ingredients for chicken and beef and eggs and all the ingredients that they were focused on. So they had some awareness challenges that they wanted to make sure people knew what their ingredients held. So you would call that traditional brand. And yet we measured that and we had terrific success. But also at the end of the day, A&W wants to have more consumers come in and actually buy products and actually buy more of their food and drinks. And so they had a 23% sales lift. And what they were able to quickly do is not only show big brand awareness and campaigns, but actually work people down very quickly through the funnel based on who was interested in that messaging, and then measure the effectiveness of whether we drove people into the actual store. We have Burberry that during the holiday season did a beautiful 2-minute video from London with Love. It was a gorgeous film. gauged people, and based on who actually engaged with the video, Burberry then could quickly retarget them and use all of our sophisticated targeting products like custom audiences, and then go in and target them with very specific products that they may enjoy. They also complemented that with a great campaign on Instagram using hyperlapse. And so what we're starting to see is that you can do a video, a brand, what we would call a typical brand awareness campaign or video, and based on the consumer's interaction with that video, we can retarget them with very specific messages and products of interest to them to try to drive actual, what we would call traditional DR or calls to action. Sometimes we get marketers that come to us with brands that have to be launched and compete in a really competitive marketplace. And so Shomi came to us, and obviously Netflix is quite dominant in terms of getting people to consume media, and Shomi was a brand new brand, and they asked us how can we best help them. And we worked in a very collaborative way with them and their agency partners and our teams to put together not only a pretty big massive awareness campaign that reached 10 million Canadians very, very quickly, changed their brand awareness metrics from low 40s to high 60s in a pretty short period of time, but also based on who interacted with their messaging, we could narrow them down the funnel, and they were able to generate 84,000 leads, very specific leads that were interested in actually signing up for the Shomi service. So again, a great example of the blending of brand and DR, which is a trend we're seeing all around the world. What we're trying to do is allow brand marketers to utilize whatever data sets they have to be able to pair them with Facebook data sets in a privacy-safe way. And so as an example, if you're a financial services company and you have a set of customers that you know a decent amount about, we would like you to be able to blend that data set with what we have on Facebook so that you can retarget those customers in a more relevant way. The more we allow marketers to utilize the data sets they have or the third-party partners that they work with, actually the more effective and relevant the advertising is going to be, both on Facebook as well as off of Facebook, which is a better experience for the consumer. One of the best examples I can give you is if you were to ask a room of people at any given time, how many of you bought a car last weekend? Maybe you get one hand up. How many of you are going to buy a car in the next 3 months? You maybe get a couple more hands. If you just bought a car this past weekend, the last thing you probably want to see for a little bit of time is car ads about selling you a new car. You just bought one. But wouldn't it be really effective if the car company you bought an ad from actually shows up in your newsfeed and tells you how to utilize one of the great features in your car, which is now so complicated because they're all running like computers? Suddenly, I'm like, wow, that car brand is showing up in a really relevant way to me. So if you think about, there is a lot of waste in the system about how much marketing is being spent to acquire customers that may not even be in the market. We think we can clean that up quite a bit, and utilizing very clean data sets and marrying it with the data we have on Facebook and Instagram, we think it'll be a lot more relevant for people, deliver more value for people as well as for brands.